Welcome to Drunk on Software. We're having a small debate on whether or not this is the Oprah episode or the Dr. Phil episode. I definitely prefer Oprah. That bald dude annoys me. But we're here with the guys from Universal Mind. Of course, got James and myself.
We're drinking at what time?
Yeah, I think it's 10 a.m. They went with Denver's best beer from the Great Divide Brewery. Definitely check it out if you're ever in town. Whoa, that's going to be a little gross. But why don't you guys introduce yourselves and share about kind of the overview of what Universal Mind's about and jump off from there.
Sure. I'm Tom Link. I'm the CTO and one of the founders of Universal Mind. And do you guys want to?
I'm Doug McCune. I'm a Flex developer working on SpatialKey primarily, or only.
Brandon Purcell, Director of Technology at Universal Mind, and sort of the overall project manager for SpatialKey.
Cool.
So tell us what SpatialKey is.
So, well, I mean,
Or
first,
what
Universal
Universal
Mind, we're a professional services company.
Okay.
So we've done a lot of work. I think we were one of the first companies doing a lot of work with Flex. And kind of as the marketplace for Flex grew, we had a large focus on building in the enterprise. So building enterprise applications.
Yeah.
And one of the difficulties actually with kind of evangelizing around building enterprise applications is they're hard to show. You know, we've done a lot of work for insurance companies, finance, and of course no one wants to show their stuff.
Yeah.
So it becomes difficult to kind of talk about why traditional enterprise software is bad without having a lot of usable stuff to work around that. And also, you know, we've done a lot of work around data visualization and started to learn a lot of expertise and realized how we could apply kind of location information to enterprise data visualization.
Were you guys building something for a customer and kind of recognize this need in the software industry and the enterprise space, or did someone just come up with this crazy idea?
So, I mean, we were doing a lot of work with data visualization, and at the same time, we were also doing some work with ESRI and MapQuest and helping them bring their platform, their kind of platform to Flash. And I think that really, we saw a lot of the work we were doing on other projects and said, geez, we've never thought about applying all this data to location.
Yeah.
And we thought we kind of had a different spin on how we could do it, knowing what we knew about the Flash platform, with you know, even different ways than kind of traditional GIS vendors were thinking about it. And it really fit into our theme of how we were changing how you could do data visualization with Flex and with Flash, different than traditional BI products. We were already doing that for customers. And so...
So you guys have always dealt with Adobe products, or what's your history before Flex came to be?
Yeah, so I mean, on the rich client side, we've kind of focused on the Flash platform really pretty exclusively. I mean, we're always kind of evaluating new technologies, and we're certainly interested in being more of an RIA firm than anything else. But I mean, clearly, especially for the more technical work we're doing on the visualization side, there's nothing coming close to competing with Flash right now.
He's already drank the Kool-Aid with the rebranding of everything as the Flash platform.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
That's good.
pick up on that. Help us dance.
Yeah.
The Kool-Aid.
Adobe's marketing is working.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so interestingly on that point, a lot of the videos I've been watching on TED recently are about how data visualization is really changing how businesses operate, how people live, just having not just access to information, but being able to visualize information in new ways is having a significant impact on what we do and how we do it and all sorts of different ways. So it's cool to see that you guys are kind of on the forefront of doing data visualization in a new and meaningful way.
Yeah, we have that conversation with customers a lot, in that a lot of the visualization that exists today is limited by technology. So it's limited by, like for example, we're working with maps, and so obviously we're really keen on seeing maps in news articles and everything, but very often it's abstracted down to, you know, here's a picture of 50 states and we're going to color them, you know, one shade of red or blue. And what's happened is that we've you know, often that data came from, you know, hundreds of thousands, millions of records, but by the time it gets to someone to consume, it can only be consumed in a pretty generic way. So all sorts of trends are lost in the data just because of how it can be presented.
Yeah.
So having a more interactive format where instead of just giving someone, you know, the map, you're giving them the data and a platform to actually be able to work with that data, there's so much more you can consume. So we were kind of excited about bringing a timeline to the map, so you can kind of slice that over time, see trends that like I said, just wouldn't exist if you're with a more traditional platform.
That's one of our biggest challenges actually, is working with clients or customers who are used to trying to get an Excel sheet that is like aggregated data, because the only way that they can make sense of it in Excel is by seeing rows that, you know, it might come from a million records, but then they have to break it down to something that they can manage and actually look at in a single Excel file.
Yeah.
And so often people aren't working with the actual raw data. And so when we go into a place and say, yeah, that's great that you now have, you know, all the aggregate totals on the state level, but where did this come from? And maybe it comes from 500,000 individual records. We can actually show you the distribution of all those individual records instead of just on a higher level.
Right.
And sort of making that sort of mental jump of, I don't have to, you know, sort of aggregate it all down to some Excel workable model. I can actually take the raw data and get that all of it on a map, or all of it over time.
That's awesome.
Well, we've pulled in data from, you know, across the web, and most of the stuff we grab off the web, whether it's a, you know, census block or, you know, a specific voting zone, those are hard to visualize because what you end up with specific points in those.
Yeah.
If we could get that raw data at more to granular level, at a address level, then we can aggregate it and make it look, you know, a lot better. So as you drill down, you can see the more detail, but you can zoom out all the way to the United States level and see the specific hotspots all the way across the United States. So as you interact and drill down, you can really focus in that those hotspots change. Whereas if you're looking on the state level, if you look at this at the state, you kind of have to switch to either a county or some other approach, where we don't right now preserve specific geographical boundaries. And there are some challenges in that as well, because some people want to separate stuff by those specific geographical boundaries. Like, I want to see things by this census block. Right. And that's some other things that we're working on to try to improve on, so we can then group by those specific areas or not have those geographical boundaries.
That's very cool.
I mean, another thing, just in terms of finding data out there, like the government publishes actually a lot of data, but often what you're going to find is you go there and there's, you know, 1.2 million records, and you can download them 100 at a time by clicking through a page list, right? And it's like the concept of, I just want it all because I can actually do something with that is pretty new. So people often have the raw data, but no one thought, well, I'll just put it up in a zip file because someone can actually do something with it. I'm going to try to present this in a way, which usually just means paging through record after record, and, you know, trying to get that all in one source can take days of, you know, going through and skimming stuff off.
My favorite
-R or something. And then a Purcell script.
My favorite are all the mapping sites that, like, these are crime mapping sites. Where I was looking at one with FAA data the other day, where, you know, you do a query and it says there were 10,000 results. We're going to show you 75 of them.
Right.
Just
Now click for the next 75.
Sometimes you can't even click. Here's 75.
So random.
Yeah. There's an awesome TED Talk I just watched last night where a guy was talking about, he's actually the guy who created the World Wide Web, talking about this thing called linked data. That's that guy, the other guy, the real guy.
All right, when are you going to do your Tom Cruise moment and get up and jump on the couch now that
We didn't rehearse that.
Sorry. Go on.
I love outdoor.
Anyways, so linked data. So this guy, the true founder of the World Wide Web, was talking about.
Who is the true founder of the world?
I don't remember his name. It's a recent TED Talk, but not even him. He was like the founder of the internet.
Okay.
The guy who actually created like HTML and HTTP and all that stuff. Anyways,
I bet he watches the show.
Not Tim Berners-Lee, is it?
If you're the true founder of the web, we want to interview you.
we want to see
It's like keep their own names out. He's just trying to tell the story. It's like, shut up, let me talk.
Eventually.
Hey, you're gonna have.
So linked data is his whole new thing. And what he's trying to do is saying, all right, it's great that we have all these web pages out there, but really the next level is to actually expose raw data. And like in the TED Talk, he has like the crowd chant like, "We want raw data," and it's awesome because like what you guys are talking about, it's like the more raw data that we can get out there, you know, the better it is for these types of applications. But the interesting thing that I need to do more research into it, but it seems like the linked data actually has a way of referencing and creating connections between data, kind of like HTML creates connections through URLs. But interesting side note.
Yeah, I mean, sort of on a related note, stuff that we're not doing now, but that we're going to be adding in the future is the ability to bring in multiple data sets and then use one to influence the other. So, for instance, one of the use cases we always throw around because we're working with some law enforcement agencies is I want to see all the crimes that have happened in the past 30 days that are car break-ins, and then I have another layer that's all the parolees in the city. And I want to see only the parolees who have been arrested for auto theft.
Yeah.
And then I want to filter to show any crimes that occurred within, a 20 block radius of any parolees. And so being able to use one data set to filter another one, or being able to use one data set to aggregate another one to say, bring in a layer of school polygons. So you can see that the area of the high schools and elementary schools, and then to say, use that to show me, buffer out maybe a mile from the school, and then show me aggregate values for how many incidents are occurring in those different areas, things like that.
That's very cool.
So it's definitely there's a lot of room to go once you get to the point where you can take any data set and extract sort of any number from it, filter it in any way, and visualize it in any way. And then once you start putting those together to use one as a filter or one as an aggregate, it gets really powerful.
And your example is all like the police department's own data, but the other cool layer to that is kind of like what you're saying, with data from any provider. So a finance company might be interested in working with actually leasing data from a police department to enrich their data. So there's a lot of opportunities there.
Yeah, and like with the linked data thing, I guess there's a site, dvpedia.com or something like that, or .org, I'm not sure, but it does the linked data on top of the data that's in Wikipedia, so it actually exposes Wikipedia's data as raw data, so then you could pull in that data source. That'd be very cool.
Yeah.
Another question along these lines, are you guys going to do anything with real-time data, like being able to somehow hook this up to streaming data feeds of some sort? Any plans for that?
We've talked about it, and we actually have done some experimentation with it, and we have a data publisher now that will publish on a periodic basis that's scheduled, and it's not really real time. It could be every few minutes, for that matter.
Right.
And I think our goal was never really to provide a real time tracking service, for example, for tracking cars or something like that, but having it up to 5 or 10 minutes so you can see historic now as well as historically kind of what's happened is something that we have done. And have some in the works with some customers that we're building out.
Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few use cases, right? Like I think we've actually talked to some of the Bright Kite guys a little bit, right? And they're local, right? They're Denver.
They're downtown.
And they already publish a GeoRSS feed of latest updates. Right. So if you want to get the last updates that occurred in the last minute, every minute, you can already get that. So we've sort of been exploring some of that. And just like people have put together some really cool, like mapping Twitter visualizations to see things like people who are talking about how the weather is in different cities. You sort of get real-time search or real-time visualization without, weather sensors. And sort of what was another cool map that people did? The terms that people were talking about during the Super Bowl. Right, you can sort of see who was a fan of who because they tracked mentions of certain players' names in different areas of the country, and you would see that during one play, all of a sudden this one area would light up because everyone was cheering for a certain player, and then in another time, a different area would light up. So there's definitely some really cool possibilities with real time.
That's awesome.
Real-time map.
Yeah, one of the ones that we should talk to Twitter. We should talk about. That we can maybe work on together is for Tour de Flex now. We actually have a stream that we just set up. We're not exposing it publicly yet, but will soon, that actually tracks the geolocation of who's using what samples in real time in Tour de Flex. So we're trying to think of ways that we can visualize that data.
Is that based upon IP address? And then
it does IP address to geo.
That's something that we've actually recently added. We have not exposed publicly because we have IP address geocoding where you could bring in a 25 or 100,000 road data file and
Yeah.
look at, download statistics for your website for software that people are downloading,
That's
where it's
awesome.
coming from, and then you could, assess that with maybe some of your marketing efforts.
Yeah, totally.
And compare based upon this month versus this
Yeah.
month. My marketing efforts have affected it in this way.
That's very cool. And I think that kind of brings up one of the topics I want to talk about today. Is a lot of our talks lately in Drunk on Software episodes have been about the economy. So how are you guys seeing like what's happening currently in the economy? Is it helping drive people towards this because having better information will help them to make better business decisions? How's it impacting business ROI?
So I think there's two themes to that. One is that in general, there's a lot of interest in GIS and there's a lot of government funding around this. So one of our customers is working with the city of Detroit to take their information about foreclosure risks, and be able to kind of line up the money that's being spent and understand how it's impacting trends. So we're definitely seeing business opportunities around that.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing is just the model we're following is kind of making the type of analyst we're doing more approachable. So we're looking to charge starting at $25 a month for what people used to pay. Put a couple zeros on that so we're looking at making this more approachable.
That's cool.
So I think our timing is good there.
Well, and from like the business decision makers, so that they can actually be the ones that can look at this data, visualize it, and not have to go to IT and have IT create some reports. And
Right.
So I think that has a lot of value.
Putting that in the hands of everyone and exposing that data, like law enforcement as an example. You have one person that's typically building those reports, but now everyone can see it from an operational awareness standpoint, and that works in really every industry. Is that data was hard. It was either in a spreadsheet or in some system that they had to ask to get a report from. So getting that out to everyone.
Yeah, so a lot of our planning has been can a business person take a credit card and their Excel file and produce something with us in a half hour
That's
that
awesome.
otherwise would have been an IT purchase that lasts 6 months.
And send it out to their whole organization.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
Either spit it out to a PowerPoint presentation, spit it out to a PDF, or send a live link to the actual report that they can then drill through.
You see my portable RIA stuff, putting Flex apps in PDFs?
I have not tried
About that
putting
later.
AS3 stuff into PDFs yet.
You can do it. It's
Still
awesome.
not getting it, but.
Yeah.
So what about on the services side? You guys talk a lot about the quality of enterprise software. Do people care about quality when budgets go down? Is that still a viable?
It's still something we have to do a lot of education on. So it depends on how you define quality.
Yeah.
And so we really want to try to measure ROI on usability, and by usability we really mean is the software getting used? Not do I feel good using it or anything like that. But
Interesting.
if you're gonna go out and spend, and for us it's a certain dollar per seat to use our software. And so we want to track how much it's being used. So we see a lot of enterprise software that people are willing to pay a lot of money on that sits on a shelf for whatever reason. So I think that's one of the interesting things in general when we talk about rich internet experiences and all that, what that means for the enterprise. I think is very different depending on kind of who you're talking to. And so for us, I think there's great ROI on building with the tools we're building with, because the software is more likely to be understood and useful.
Yeah, that's a great measure.
Yeah, so you were sort of talking just in general about enterprise software. Coming at it from sort of the GIS perspective, the interesting thing about what we're doing is that we're not GIS guys. Like, we didn't come from a background of using all the normal GIS products, and so we came from the background of developing usable internet applications, and then we saw that GIS stuff is really fucking cool, and let's go into that. And that comes with pluses and minuses. The minuses are when we started, we didn't have the experience in house of what people are used to seeing, how these analyses are done, all that stuff. And yet what we did have was a different mentality for developing these applications that you just don't see in traditional
Well, it's probably
enterprise
helpful to
development.
not have that baggage of knowing that world, being able to take it.
We talked about that a lot, and we tapped into resources that help us get learn a lot about GIS, because there was a steep learning curve with a lot of the things that we needed to be able to do in our application.
Yeah.
But we always kind of took that step back and said, let's not do it the way it's always been done. Let's take a new and fresh approach to everything we do. And I think it's really made a big difference.
Yeah.
We've had tons of comments during our beta test. We've had hundreds of customers that have came through the beta, and many have provided the feedback is that, I launched into this application, I was able to get a data set in, and I didn't have to read any documentation, anything. I just discovered, clicked my way around, and figured it out. And we've got, several emails of feedback back, so that it really kind of reinforces the approach that we took was the right way to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, we come from the applications that we usually build are, they're fast, they're real time, they're what you want to click and you want to see the data that you want to see, versus a lot of the stuff that's out there that exists in sort of the enterprise or the GIS space is, it takes a long time to generate these reports, right? It's a process that sort of, you say, I want to report on this, and then come back tomorrow. Right. And we just never had that mentality, and so we sort of said, well, I want to be able to see, all homicides from March that occurred between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. and I want to see it right now, just by clicking 3 buttons. And so that was the underlying assumption, was like, we should just be able to show this data as fast as humanly possible. And so we didn't have we couldn't accept that could take 3 days. That was never part of the equation. So I think that helped us a lot.
Yeah, and part of our way of looking at things, I think, was knowing that as soon as you see that question, or see the answer to that question, there's always another question behind it. Was it different 4 o'clock? Was it different here? And so the real exciting thing for us is that traditionally, I think in GIS, you went and asked someone that question, a professional who knows how to work their software, they brought it back to you. You don't really have the ability to say, can you do this instead? Because you're going to wait, a while to get that answer.
Interesting. So what are you guys doing to deal with all this data? Is that part of your service offerings?
So our service offerings kind of come in 2 flavors. One is a software as a service architecture that's built on the cloud, and I'll talk about that a bit. Another one's kind of a behind the firewall. And we can actually talk about, some of the sensitivity that customers have around where their data is located, and that's driven by where they're willing to put it. In the cloud, we've built a software as a service architecture, and our goal was to build something that was as close to as infinitely scalable as we could, and we could add as many customers as we want on top of it. And each individual customer has their own unique URL in our software as a service. So I sign up for my site.spatialkey.com. I load it up. I can add users to it. I can add data to it. What happens behind the scenes doesn't matter. So we've built this clustered-based architecture that scales both horizontally and vertically, that we can add any number of organizations to, and we're using the Amazon EC2 cloud to build that on top of, and using a combination of really all open source software to do that with
Java or
JBoss, which is our backend, with Blaze DS. We're using a Postgres database with GIS capabilities on the back end. And then just front end stuff, we're using HA Proxy as like our load balancer to load balance across. So when you come in from your organization, you load the Flash application. And the Flash application, we have the capability to connect to any one of the clusters. Typically in an HTML-based architecture, the server you're on is the server you're on. With Flash, you can open up the app, and you have an app, and it can connect to anywhere. So we control where it connects to, and we can control which cluster, so we can then distribute all of the data across the cloud. So
you have some round-robin load balancing scheme.
Exactly, and individual clusters with application servers and databases that correspond to that cluster.
That's awesome.
So, but a single Swift that gets that everyone
single
gets.
Swift.
That's awesome.
And that offers us the ability, if for example today we had 1,000 customers join, and we needed to scale that, within about an hour I can stand up a new cluster and start adding new customers to that.
That's awesome.
And then add another one and add another one. And we're not investing anything up front in that. We're paying for the hours we use based upon the usage fees. And we're tapping into everything that Amazon offers from their EC2 instances. We're using mostly Linux-based stuff, and we're using their EBS, which is like their persistent storage.
Right.
And if you were to invest in that yourself and try to build out the architecture, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get into that type of stuff. And we had, with no upfront investment, we were able to build all of that, and,
awesome.
and it works great as an architecture. The other part of that is that I can sit at my desk and deploy updates very quickly and affect customers. We had a bug reported yesterday. Within 20 minutes, we had a fix deployed.
That's awesome.
So whether it's the client or the server application, I can IM Doug and say, this is the issue. He fixes it. He said, I fixed it. We have cruise control running on the back end. It pulls from source control, builds our production thing. I type a couple of commands. It deploys to the cloud. It's fixed.
Wow.
Right, and it's fixed for all customers, right? So
Yeah,
you know, that's sort of the benefit of running in the cloud versus behind people's firewalls is, you know, within 20 minutes, we don't just roll out a fix for one customer, we roll out a fix for everybody instead of having to go
And then
one by one.
behind the firewalls for the customers that want to publish out to the cloud, we have data publishers that they can install in their architecture, push over SSL out to the cloud and push their data out there.
Right.
So you kind of get the best of both worlds. But the second part of that is who, you know, how comfortable they are in taking their data and pushing it out there. I think, you know, I think you mentioned before we started that Salesforce has kind of changed some people's perceptions on that, and that's in the commercial side. But on the government side, with police agencies and other, we're fighting some battles with, you know, who's responsible if things are compromised. So if the police are profiling this particular person, and this person knows nothing about it, and then that data gets exposed, that person can then sue them. So who's then ultimately responsible for that? And we've taken every security measure I think that any enterprise infrastructure is going to put in place. But you know, it's most of the time that compromises in data come from people just being not responsible with data, as opposed to systems being hacked. So we're fighting that battle in a lot of areas, and I think a lot of people will continue to do it, because my belief is that the cloud computing model is really the future of building out your infrastructure. There's no need to go invest in 2 or 3 racks at a hosting infrastructure and spend $200,000 or $300,000 in building that out when you can scale on demand. You know, I've seen startups that have gone from 4 or 5 servers to 3,000 in a week. How would that be possible without the cloud computing architecture? It's just not.
And I think the economy plays into that before. So we talked about usability. I mean that's the other thing for a police department. I mean like the infrastructure they have to invest in. We can come in and tell them, hey, we have this great product. You can do whatever with it. Traditionally, to get IT to reserve rack space for that, decide they're going to take on managing the app, do all that stuff. They really need to believe it's going to work for them.
Yeah.
We're offering them something totally different. Give us a few bucks, and if it doesn't work out next month, thanks.
Yeah, we're done.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that comes up is the initial reaction is we need to host all the data, we need to have it on our servers, we need to lock it down, and then the price difference comes up.
Yeah.
And suddenly pushing it to a secure cloud environment it looks beautiful, right? So
I could spend an hour or two installing this publisher to get data out, or they can do it manually themselves, and there's nothing to install. It's there, it's done.
Wow.
But if we got to install it behind their firewall, there's a lot of things that have to be done and configured that's unique to that environment, and it makes the cost go from here to way over here. So the barrier to entry is much lower in a SaaS offering.
I mean, it will take a while before that gets. I think you're definitely starting to see a lot of widespread adoption with Salesforce stuff in businesses. And like Brandon said, when you start getting into government, when you start getting into sort of security stuff, then it's definitely a lot harder. And the security, the guarantees and sort of controlling access from specific organizations will improve. But for the next few years, sort of any real enterprise offering, especially in government, is I think going to have to do sort of a mixed model, or you can just sort of not have the customers who require behind the firewall stuff.
Yeah.
And both options are fine. But
I heard recently that the Australian government tried to outlaw any government agency putting data out up in the cloud. And it's all right, that's just got to be total, fear driven, and
Well, it comes with the
Absolutely.
irony of, do you trust anybody in government to actually protect the data anyway?
But then you let someone take their laptop home with with a million social security numbers on it,
Exactly.
and they leave it at Starbucks somewhere, and somebody snags it.
You get that.
or they email it on Gmail. I mean, so
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's there's a lot. The measures we put in place in the cloud-based environment are a lot more stringent than giving the data to just anyone so they can just carry it around with them.
So in terms of the cost of bringing this to market, how big was the team? Because that seems like the other part of the world that changed is how many developers you need to build something like this.
I think it's a lot less you can do to build something like that if you're very focused. I mean, Universal Mind as a whole, we have a pretty large team, but SpatialKey, we have a small team of developers, both server side, client side, infrastructure, the business side as well.
Yeah, I mean, we fluctuate. Right now, we've got we sort of focused in and got ready for this release. Right now, we're.
I mean, if you consider it a whole, we're really just 5.
Yeah,
Five.
that sounds like.
And we've gone up and down. We've had contractors, we've had other employees, so we've gone. We've fluctuated, but it's no matter how you look at it, it's a handful. Right?
Yeah, we have the fortune of being able to borrow from UM for.
Yeah,
when people are on the bench, we can go borrow from them and have them work on
Even if
it.
And for funding.
Even if you double or triple that, though, when you compare that historically, like the number I like that someone was saying is, 20 years ago it took 300 people, 10 years ago it took 10, now it takes 3, and it sounds like you guys have kind of seen that trend where even if you were double, triple the size you are now at any point, historically that's still a small team for the kind of features you guys are talking about.
It's also interesting. You get as you add people, you don't get double the work output.
Yeah,
sure. We're very focused on, and we have everyone owns their specific area, and we all trust each other and know that we're all going to make the right decisions, and we can move forward quickly. And we use an agile methodology to really put, and that's what we've actually been working on this week, is putting all of the features out there for our roadmap and identifying in this next sprint what we're going to accomplish and what we're going to release, as well as the next sprint, and just work through those, knock down those features, QA it and get it out, and we can deploy it quick. So we can take features, talk about them, build them, get them deployed, and impact them on customers right away.
Yeah, I mean, the reason we're here in Colorado is we sort of got the whole team together for meeting in the office, and
I thought it was to snowboard.
well, it was to ski as well. But in addition to going up to the mountains, we also actually sat in an office and did some work.
Imagine that.
But we're planning.
That's not how we shrink the size of team.
We're planning out features for sort of the next release, and we've got a whole feature set now that we're basically going to do hardcore development, sort of 3 weeks, a good solid QA time. We're going to have a new release out there for customers in a month.
That's awesome.
And that's.
How does your interaction with designers work? Because that's one of the things that stuck out to me when I started looking at SpatialKey was, man, this thing looks great, and not just from a visual perspective, but from an interaction perspective as well. The user interactions were very clean, and so I'm curious how you guys were able to get a designer that could come up with something that worked out well, and then how you guys worked with them as developers and that sort of thing.
Well, when we first started, we it was kind of the developer was the designer, and probably the middle of late last year, we brought a designer on board full time, and we worked close with him.
Yeah.
To develop comps, and we talk during our meetings and talk over those comps as well as user interaction. We went out to one of our customers, talked with them, actually rode around police cars, and then came back, and then we walked through the comps, and we also talked about all the feature functionality. So we brought the developers, both Doug as being main front end one, our back end server engineers, our designers, and we all talked about all the features, and so everybody was on board with exactly how everything kind of should work. Yeah. And then our designer went away and worked on that stuff, and we just worked through individual features. That's cool. He's been absolutely outstanding.
Cheers to Francisco.
Yeah, it sounds like
absolutely. Francisco's he's been awesome.
I think that's one of the most challenging things about RA right now is getting designers that can really design RA as well. Usually they design them like web applications, standard web applications, or like desktop applications. And in RA, neither of those are the best models.
We're all remote, so everyone works from different places. I'm in the Bay Area.
I'm in Rochester, New York.
Where's Francisco?
He's in Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan. Right? So we're
sort of. We don't even know where to get.
Yeah, right. Actually, I don't. I only know. I see Francisco when. Yeah.
He's on Skype. That's all he knows.
Exactly. Or when we come to different meetup places, but yeah, we do a daily call, which we try to stick to sort of a 15-minute Scrum call. But then
the first part,
we try to, but then since we're remote,
good Scrum call deteriorates.
Yeah, we end up spending a lot of time on the phone, and so what ends up happening is we have a lot of back and forth with design development stuff, and so. I don't know if you could log the number of hours that we've spent just going over comps and sort of iterating over that stuff providing feedback. It's, we spend a lot of time on the phone.
Do you think that's the reality, even if when Catalyst gets here, is that it just takes a lot of time and work to make something that looks and works good?
Yeah, so it's not technical workflow that's our big problem. It's the problems we're trying to solve.
Yeah.
So the interactions, it's not so much. I think there are challenges to solve on how to go from a comp to a.
What about in
code.
other environments? Do you think the tools will really have a big impact, or is it still that people have to think about those things and be willing to invest in them?
They're two different problems. So you mentioned we were out in police cars. So we've become really invested in understanding the problems that are out there and understanding. We got so much better understanding of the problems with the software that existed by going out and working with people using it in an actual situation, not hearing it over a phone call but actually doing it.
Well, the police car example is fantastic, right? You're on a car and then you suddenly realize it doesn't click until you're there. They have a laptop in their car that has to work in sunlight and in darkness, right? And you look at the software that they're actually using, and I didn't know this until I went out there. Software that they're using toggles between daylight mode and nighttime mode, and it switches the color scheme because it's really hard to design for both, and you don't really understand that stuff until you see it working.
And they're actually interacting with it driving 80 miles an hour. That's the other impressive thing. It's not a joke. I mean, it scared the crap out of you. They're going to type it on the keyboard.
Yeah, you'll be right in there. They see someone's license plate, they'll
be typing it down the interstate. So, that's a perfect example of you don't know how the person's using it, and that's probably a unique edge case. Yeah. But
did you at least get to hang out with some cool cops, or were they like?
Yeah, we get to shoot guns too.
Yeah,
it's fun. Not while they're in the police.
No, this is true. This is true.
You said Detroit. Was it cops in Detroit?
No, it was in Detroit.
Because that would fit the mental picture of but just shoot and keep going.
Detroit, here's a gun.
Back to your issues. I think there's two different things. Is that the tools help with the work, improve the workflow to get from one point to the next, but there still has to be that understanding of the problem. The designer develops a comp, and then we have to the comp is just a static piece of something, and then we have to then work that back into how it's going to work in the application and talk through it. So that comp may change 10 times between the first iteration and the last iteration.
I'm curious how you guys do your comps, just in Photoshop or Fireworks.
You know what? All I know is I get an image in the end. I don't even know what he uses.
Fireworks mostly.
Fireworks, I think, is what he uses mostly.
Yeah. And how does that work though because a lot of your UI stuff, I would imagine models interactivity. So is that adequate to use?
Well, so
I'm not trying to pitch Catalyst in any way.
No one is designing only visuals. Like everyone is aware of the interactivity. So there is no mock-up that completely doesn't address the interactive nature of things, like the workflow, how what happens when we do this. And actually, a lot of our time spent is on addressing those issues. It's talking through it with the designer and saying, okay, I see this beautiful comp. That looks awesome. Now what happens when this text has 80 characters instead of 20 characters and all that stuff, and everything is dynamic in here. So and how do you get from this screen to this screen? It's not just and so the designer is really involved in all of that, right? We don't have any workflow that is handing off static comps without thinking about how one moves to the next and how the interaction works.
A lot of your interaction with the designer is probably just going through that iterative process and figuring out what those interactions are.
Usually the feedback that I give has nothing to do with how the comps look, because they look fucking great. It's like, yes, that's fantastic. All the feedback has to do with the edge case things of, okay, but when they select this and then they select this, and I'm supposed to show this data, does it fit? Does it look good in that scenario? You might have a timeline that looks great with when you're grouping by month and you've got really big bars, and then when you're grouping by hour and you've got small ones, it doesn't work. There are things like that, and so we talk through all of that a lot.
Are you able to apply the agile process to that part of the development?
What do we try to do in terms of deliverables?
Deliverables from Cisco, you mean?
Yeah.
He's working in conjunction on 4 or 5 different features. Right. And so, it's hard, from my perspective, a scheduling perspective, it's hard to say you're going to work on this for a day. Right. You may work on this one piece for 2 hours, and then send it out to the team, and then we'll talk about it during the meeting. And the next day you go back and do another iteration of it.
Right.
So it's simultaneous scheduling of multiple different features in the app
Right.
and comps.
And
then
knowing when to throw something over the fence,
Right.
like not sending someone down a path so far where they're not getting good feedback on, oh, but what about when we're grouping by milliseconds?
I mean, we iterate pretty quickly over design comps before we start development.
Yeah.
And we also, we usually do design comps that we need relatively quickly to go into development. We also do some stuff that's sort of more long term. And so we've got some like existing design comps that we've got for features that we haven't developed yet that we will be iterating over as we get closer to wanting to implement those. But we spend a lot of time up front before implementation, so that we know that we're implementing the right thing.
And future thinking as well, so we don't paint ourselves into a corner. Like if we think we're going to add this feature in the future, if we're implementing just this portion of it now, so we don't have to completely rework it to add this feature. So there's some comps that are in the future that for future functionality that we've thought about, but we know we can't implement because of the complexities now.
Right.
But the UI, we don't want it to change so severely just because we have to go add this additional feature. And that's kind of difficult to think through. And we've spent hours not arguing.
Arguing is a good word.
And we
process.
I mean, everybody gets their input into the whole process because there's so many edge cases to consider. There's so many different things to talk about when we're talking about future functionality. We try to not, just like I said, paint ourselves into a corner. Just build it so that we can continue to add new functionality and add it quickly through the agile process.
Right.
And talking about scaling the team, I mean, I think we're at the point now where most of the features on our list are technically not difficult, right? I mean, or those are the biggest challenges.
It's interaction design.
Yeah, it's keeping a consistent behavior pattern in the application, and when we have an application that has twice as many features, is it going to be twice as complicated to use?
Right.
Right. So it's getting that
So I
done.
mentioned sort of taking one data set and like filtering by another data set. The technical implementation of that isn't that difficult. You're sort of applying one as a filter on another, but how you get there is very difficult. And another big feature that we're going to be rolling out has to do with sort of mapping comparisons. So saying I want to see 2007 and 2008. Now I want to see the percentage change between those, and I want to see a heat map that doesn't show me raw data from either one, but shows me the increases and decreases.
Right.
And technically implementing that isn't that difficult, but it's how you get there to not completely confuse the user. And so it's so easy to write horrible UIs that it accomplishes the goal, but it does
You never
so.
figure it out.
But
You never
customers are
figure it
not
out.
going to figure it out without you flying in and teaching them how to do it in a 3-day training, right? And we're trying to make our software a little
Well,
bit
this
better
seems
than
to be the problem with a lot of enterprise software is that it starts, really simple and anyone can use it, and then as we add all the features to cover all the edge cases, it becomes like we talked about earlier with all the current GIS software. It's just you have to be an expert in it in order to really use it. So
And for some things you really do need to be an expert to understand what you're doing. We're trying to take the 40% that's most applicable and bring it to the masses, basically.
And as we add stuff, just not overcomplicating anything, so that people can discover how to use it and not necessarily have to be educated. There's always some little edge case feature that you're never going to be able to do that, but a majority of our features we want to be able to just find them and use them with no training and no documentation.
And I mean, also, a lot of what we do roll out, we'll roll out a developer version, not a developer version, but we'll develop because we've gotten direct requests, we want this feature. And like right now, we've got a handful of features that are out there publicly that are flagged as we're going to go through and re-review the interaction design, and we're going to really simplify it so that things that it was great because we need to be able to do this. Now we say, all right, we need to be able to do this simply. And so we sort of every iteration is making sure that we go back and flag anything like that sort of snuck in under the covers that we need to rethink how it works.
And I think that's a big problem with enterprise software is that we can iterate through our list 5 times faster if it's just a matter of getting this feature in and this feature and this feature in. But what you'd end up with is no one will use it, or incredibly complicated processes to get people using it.
Well, it seems like a core part of what you guys are trying to build is simplicity, and if you keep that as a core goal, then you always have to balance that with adding new features.
Right.
Yeah, we're basically going to have to rewrite a feature that works to make it a lot easier, and we've got comments on it, so customers feel it's difficult now, then we think it provides a lot of value to make that a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, there are two definitions of works, right? There's technically working, and then there's actually being usable. So we try to go for the second.
Yeah. So you guys you're doing all this with Flash and then obviously Java backend. What sort of challenges have you seen with developing on the Flash platform and the technical side?
Yeah, so I'll adjust some of sort of the mapping challenges, and just the sheer data stuff. I mean, for one, sort of the combination of back end and front end, we probably couldn't be doing any of the stuff without something as small as AMF to transfer the data. It's just, we're trying to transfer a lot of data, and we try to cut it down to as small footprint as we possibly can. But if we had to do, XML, even like gzipped XML or any other format, it just wouldn't work. And like we have to have the smallest footprint possible. And so, and even beyond that, like we do a lot of not a lot, we do some custom AMF encoding and decoding stuff because we're trying to cut down on how many bytes we're sending.
Wow.
And so we do some custom serialization so that we can, things like sometimes we're sending certain parameters in a VO and sometimes we're not. We'll send a bit flag that indicates whether we're supposed to read more bytes or not.
Wow.
And so stuff like that, we really tried to get the footprint down on how much data we're transferring because, we do sort of, in terms of performance, perceived performance, maybe half of it is in terms of how much we have to calculate on the server, and then a big chunk of it is just how long it takes to get those bytes.
Right.
And then of course the other side is how long it takes for us to render that stuff. And so we spent a lot of time optimizing map renderings to really focus on what Flash Player does well, which is, you look at other platforms and there's just no way to do the low level graphics processing that would let you produce these images. And so, the heat map that you see when you look at a SpatialKey map is all rendered client side. We don't pre-generate anything. And it's all rendered based on raw data. So if you update a single record, and that would change the heat map, the next time you load that heat map, it's going to be totally different. And so that might be, a million records that go into creating this image. And they all count, and we all do it all on the fly when you request it. And
do you take all the records out to the client and do everything on the client, or some of that processing done on the server
side?
we do server side stuff. So so it's a combination of server and client to get the end result.
So based on what view they want to see, you come up with some
Right. Because the map that you're looking at could be any cut of that data. Right. We allow any filtering whatsoever. So if I want to see 5 a.m. to 8 a.m., I can see that. If I want to see 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., but I only see things that occurred on Wednesdays, in this certain polygon, like all that stuff happens at this, in real time.
So when I filter, it's always a round trip. There's not really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Because sort of the other option is to use sort of OLAP stuff that will do it all on the server and pre-calculate sort of a shitload of dimensions. Like you have all these options. And then with an OLAP server, you can then quickly get at any of those, but you have to have pre-set up what those options are.
Sure. Right. You have to know what you want to ask.
Yeah, you have to know what you want to ask. So we try to avoid that because it just seems like way too much work to have to know the questions that people are going to ask. And so we try to do it all in real time.
And
That's awesome.
And because of that, I mean, we've done up to millions of rows of data, and I mean, it requires a little more beef to do it, and probably could support a few less users. But I think we think the power that the fact that you can ask it any question and slice it and dice it any way is more powerful than that. I mean,
but it's not just maps, right? It's I want to see things that occurred on Mondays between 5 and 8 p.m. and I want to see how that went in the timeline over the past year, right? It's like all those things are being processed.
Right, and that's an interesting thing too with how we evolved, is that we started that by thinking about how important it was to be able to filter that on the map and aggregate on the map. And we realized that, there's not really solutions doing this well with other traditional, timelines and any other way you can figure out how to slice up data by time, by category, by anything else. And so SpatialKey went from just a cool way to visualize data on a map to a way to visualize data where mapping is the thing we do probably better than anybody else, but there's a lot of other ways.
But I've thrown together a lot of reports that don't have maps. like I put together a spreadsheet of all the Flex SDK classes. I had a count of number of lines.
Do you
what
want
else,
to get
like-
into why so you can share with James?
No, I'm not
I'm
going
sure
to
you read your blog too.
I'm not going to bitch here. I'm going to be nice. No, but in that scenario, I had this raw spreadsheet that had individual class and number of lines, right? And then I pulled in SpatialKey, and what I could see was average number of lines per package. I could see the maximum class size in any top level package or full package
Have you
name.
heard of Crap4J?
No.
It's a statistic,
The greatest
it's a,
product name ever.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
what does it do? Static code analysis on Java to determine if your code is crap or
Right,
not.
right. Nice.
So we could
It
build
gives you a crap score?
Yeah, it gives you a crap score. And then somebody built an IntelliJ plugin to rewrite your code to get a low Crap4J score so that your manager would be happy with you.
Whether or not it's any better.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
Yeah. But we could build crap for Flex with this.
There we go.
It's pretty cool to hear that you take the same thing that the police can do analysis on, and you can come out with some opinion on the quality of the Flex SDK.
Right.
Well, that's hard to do too, because another thing we found is that with cartography, with maps, very often maps are usually made with the result in mind. So if I'm going to show this type of map,
Yeah.
I'm going to use this type of symbolization, this type of whatever. So it's been a whole different workflow to say we're going to figure out how to take whatever you want to throw at this and make it useful.
And people have a hard time of getting it right away because it's kind of a game-changing, whole different way to look at stuff. And so if you just throw it in front of someone with raw data, they really don't know what to do with it.
Right, because they're not used to that in Excel. It doesn't work like that.
But if you spend some time showing them, they start thinking, well, I could do this with this, or I could do this, and it really opens up a whole realm of possibilities.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
That's definitely one of the coolest parts of being on a call with a customer, and sort of sometimes it takes a while for you to sort of explain. No, just throw your whole data in there, and then just take a look and see what we can do, and then sort of the light bulb will click on, and then the number of things that they then want to do just increases. Right? It's like, oh, I have this other data set too.
Yeah.
And it's like, let me throw that in and see them both at the same time. Like it's like there's a certain switch that changes.
It's interesting you guys pointed out earlier how it seems like one of your core goals was reducing latency. And I feel like that's one of the really big things that RAs are really doing or should be doing. And really the evolution of software is one of the big parts is about just reducing overall latency. So it sounds like that's a big part of what you guys are trying to do as well.
Yeah, we definitely always keep an eye on it. The bandwidth stuff is easier to monitor. The sort of performance of the actual Flex app is more difficult. We've got the profiling, we've got just various ways, but the bandwidth stuff, you see a direct impact because you see I'm transferring 1,800 records.
Right.
I know that this is taking up 190K, and you say, what happens if I strip out these two numbers, right? And that's going to be a certain number of bytes, and then you do a test and you see that, okay, I now got it down to under 100K. And so we have certain sort of, we have a few goals like that. I don't want any map to take up more than 100K in transfer size.
And especially in the police example, this can be very important because they may be on very low bandwidth connections, right? And so
the number of computers, not just connections, displays, old CRT monitors. We've seen our stuff running on some stuff. Like you just never think about it because you're sitting there in your in your office, you're working on a nice
dual core,
big monitor or just even your MacBook screen. Right? It's just like it's great, and then you realize that they're not running on those machines, right? Or those displays, or they're running it on a projector that is 10 years old that doesn't work in half sunlight. It's like all this stuff comes up that you don't really realize until you go there.
One of our first release was really a dark background with not a lot of contrast. We completely shifted focus because of input and as well as going on site the customer and seeing there's
These old washed out projectors.
So you can't see
projectors.
You got something that's running at 1024 by 768 and it's all washed out and you really can't see anything. So we have to think about that during our design process when choosing our color schemes.
Yeah, I mean, if you looked over the history of sort of the application, I mean, it sort of went from a research thing to various stages through what you see today. And the number of different like color schemes and just sort of things that we've tried it's pretty funny to look back, a couple of years to when we first started. And yeah, the current color scheme is completely dictated because we got feedback from customers that it was hard to see on a projector with sunlight.
We fired up the old app, and Tom goes, "Were we really that dark?" Because you don't realize it until you completely change color schemes and you go back to look at the old app.
It's weird looking at old stuff that you've created.
Yeah.
It's like, and looking at old code is always weird for me too. It's like, really? Did I do that?
Well, and a lot of things get added one feature at a time. So we talk about trying to set rules that map rendering shouldn't be more than 100K or whatever. But even yesterday we were arguing about, or not arguing, we were talking about.
Arguing is probably a better word, but yeah.
There were sticks.
It's positive.
But adding another feature, would mean whether or not we'd add something to have it in the server call every time, right? Where that feature might get used 20% of the time. So that whole debate about adding something in that, will it cost another trip to the server? Do we just include it just in case? That's really more of an art than a science. I mean, it's hard to get good numbers around, is there a payoff for increasing the size of this for this feature?
Yeah, being
but we know
careful.
that collectively it's dangerous, right?
Yeah, so when you add a feature, you have to evaluate what is the increase in payload for that call, what's the increase of performance on the server, and not just add it to add it. It has value as a feature, but does the value overcome the actual impact from performance?
Yeah.
And if you don't take that into consideration, it's easy to over bloat everything.
It's really easy.
And then you have to go back and then reevaluate and remove those things. So
is a lot of this stuff, are you hitting walls with the performance of Flash Player or Flex or
Both. We're hitting performance problems with database, with Java processing, with data transfer, with Flash Player. I mean, we're pushing everything as hard as it'll go. So the amount that I'm rendering, depending on which rendering you're using, we're going as fast as we can, and every step we're trying to optimize.
So what are some of the things you've ended up doing to optimize on the Flash side?
On the Flash side, so
I was going to say, first is bandwidth, right? Reducing the bandwidth reduced a lot of the rendering stuff dramatically.
It sounds like
perceived time between when you're waiting for a map to refresh and when it does.
And how we're queuing calls when we were doing that as well.
On the Flash side, we're doing a lot of just raw, low-level bitmap processing. Something as simple as rendering a circle 1,000 times versus rendering it once and then using copy pixels with a transformation matrix to scale it to the right size. Stuff like that.
Right, yeah.
And so you quickly learn when you're really digging in which bitmap data calls take the most. So draw calls take longer than copy pixels.
So do you just cache all your shapes and then
not all, but if I'm going to draw 1,800 pixels or 1,800 circles, I'm going to draw it once and then call copy pixels a whole shitload of times. Right, so things like that, you start to learn what's slow and what's fast.
And one of the things I've heard in Flash Player is that there isn't a good way to actually benchmark the actual render times for drawing operations. Is that true?
Not for a single draw operate. Well, no. I mean, we have a our renderings try to be smart about how much to render in one frame cycle.
Right.
So we try to keep track of how much time is taking us for doing map rendering, and a single map rendering might take 2 or 3 frames.
Right.
If it's on a slow computer, if it's on a fast computer, it'll do it all in 1 frame. And so we split up the rendering stuff and a lot of the other processing stuff we do based on how quickly we're doing it. And if we're exceeding the frame rate, we'll split it and we'll kick it over to another frame. So if you're on a fast machine, you might see our renderings come up instantly. If you're on a slow machine, you might see it come up in 3 phases over 3 frames.
It does it progressively so that the user is not sitting there, waiting.
Right.
The perceived performance is better.
Right. Yeah. The perceived performance. You're never going to see the little spinny guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
The little rainbow wheel shouldn't
That's
come up when we're rendering.
It's cool
maps.
that you guys have that attention to detail on that, because most people probably wouldn't put in the work to.
Yeah. The thing is, like, we started with doing all this rendering client side is a pretty big task, and we started with the amount of data that was too much. Like we just couldn't. When we first started, we were doing way too much processing. We were transferring way too much data, and so we started with the assumption like if this is gonna work, it's got to get faster.
Yeah.
And so that was always like from the beginning, we were trying to get out cycles. So.
Have you guys tested any of the Flash Player 10 new drawing API stuff to see if there's much of a difference there? Is there no? It sounds like with the way you're doing copy pixels and matrix transformations that it may not even matter at this point.
It's probably not going to matter for the current renderings that we're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, Player 10 just gives you increased performance, sort of, no matter what.
Yeah.
Using vectors as opposed to arrays would help.
Right.
I haven't done really deep tests in terms of how much of an impact that would make.
Yeah.
We haven't quite been willing to make the full jump to rolling out Player 10.
Right. Well, then, with your user base, that's probably a challenge to get.
I actually haven't seen that much. I used to do a lot of work with medical stuff.
Yeah.
And computers in hospitals were so locked down that getting a version of Flash Player installed was impossible.
Right.
We haven't seen it that much in police or in other clients. I was actually a little surprised, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it's usually one of the things we hear about in enterprise software with Flex is, we got to deal with the Flash Player adoption, things. But that's good that in your target base that hasn't been as much of an issue.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about moving to Player 10 for a few things. One of the things was immediate file upload so that we could get the bytes of the file.
Right.
So if you upload to CSV, we don't have to go to the server.
Right, yeah.
And there are a few other things, but the number of things that we would gain, we're not doing 3D stuff that comes in Player 10. Some of the pixel bender stuff could potentially be pretty big for us since we're doing a lot of graphics processing, but I haven't really investigated that much yet.
Huh. Cool. Anything else you guys?
I'm gonna grab one more beer while we're here.
Yeah.
There's no more beer on the turf.
Now we gotta wait till you're done with that one to wrap up.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to pee before that.
Well,
This has been mind blowing. I think. for me.
Mind-blowing.
Mind blowing.
A religious
Really?
Okay, we're definitely Oprah if there's a religious experience in it for you.
Absolutely.
No, it's been a fun trip for us. It's been about how many months has it been? I left Adobe in November of 2007, and since then it's been a great trip in terms of. And I haven't worked too much on product development ever before, and
Yeah, I mean,
fun.
Tom, that's like from your perspective, right? UM is a consulting shop. This is the first product.
yeah, I mean, this is a brand new foray for us, and we've looked at how a lot of other people do it and modeled after them and followed what they've done and added our own spin to it. It's been a great learning experience and fun too.
I think it's been great for us as a company too, because I think we appreciate our customers more. We're our own customer and we're the jerks. We change our mind on stuff and all of that. And we've had a lot of opportunity to do stuff the way we wanted, so we can take practices and push them back to the rest of the organization, even when a customer wouldn't let us do it. So we're starting to. It's easier now, for example, we're doing a lot with the cloud in SpatialKey, and now we're making it a lot easier to be able to deploy even development and test environment for customers on EC2 and everything. So there's been a lot of cool interplay between the two pieces of the organization.
Nice.
Yeah, and we've tried to look at, as opposed to solving a lot of the problems ourselves, look at everything open source that's out there, what everybody else has really solved, and then try to leverage that so that we don't have to solve the problem that's already been solved.
That's cool.
And I tell you, in some ways, it was some big wins. I mean, we've been able to develop features in 2 weeks that would take 6 months before.
That's awesome.
And they work amazingly well, and for the most part very bug free. So it's in some cases there are some minor miracles that Doug and Anthony from our development side in the recent months have solved, that we look back and we thought when we were thinking about the feature from a management perspective, we're like, this is going to take a long time. I don't know if we should do it. And these guys are like, well, let's just do it. And we solve it and we get it done, and we're just like, holy crap,
That's awesome.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
And it works, and we've got hundreds of customers using it already.
That's cool.
It's gonna be fun in software the next 5 to 10 years with what's possible, and now
Open
you guys
source,
said
yeah.
it. Well, and you guys said with customers, and they see takes them a little bit, but once they get it, it's like, oh, and then I can do this, and I think the bar's just gonna go.
The
up
expectations are going to be so much higher.
That's
the
what's gonna be
platforms
exciting.
are finally there where we can meet them, and that's been the most interesting for me with our enterprise clients. it's almost disappointing how low their expectations are, and they don't want to raise them because they're afraid, you know, as a management, they're afraid, oh, well, then we'll just fail. And they're like, no, we can do this, but they won't.
Yeah.
They're spending the money, they could get that better product, but they don't want to jeopardize the timeline or, you know, whatever it may be. So I think it's going to be fun as more and more people see apps like SpatialKey and go, oh, I want that too.
Well, for us, the biggest challenge for us now is to educate our target users about what's possible with what we've built. The next phase is going to be them understanding that and now pushing back at us and saying, well, you did that, so of course you should be able to give us this.
And as a developer, I think that's where the fun part is, because finally then it'll be like a challenge rather than, it seems like a lot of the job these days is educating them of like, no, we can do this now, you know, this isn't 5 years ago. So
Yeah, it's hard to ask what do you want when what's possible in their mind is not what we can do.
Yeah, that's really where Agile breaks down for me. I mean, I'm a big fan, but when you put it on the users, they either don't know it's possible or they're just going to describe what they've always had before. So there does have to be a real
That's the thing. It's
synergy.
identifying a few key customers who really get it,
Yeah.
who understand, who can give you valuable feedback.
Yeah.
You know, that's so key to what we're doing.
And identifying some visionaries to help you drive something.
Yeah, we've been really lucky there.
We have.
People who've really
That's cool.
helped us out. Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking the time on the way to the airport.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Time to go
I have
catch
a
your
feature
flight.
request
Yeah.
before we end. So, could you guys add the physics form? Your physics form?
I saw you did some video where you demoed that.
I demoed that every time, every presentation I demo that. It's awesome.
Was that your sticker in the forehead?
No,
That's good.
That's the Flare Toolkit stuff. But no, the physics form, like it falls apart when you do something wrong in the form. Like, you know, as a form validation error, it's like everything crumbles.
You know what I'm working on now is a lot of head tracking stuff.
Yeah, dude, it's
and
so
so, in terms of logging in or something,
when you
you
present,
can just nod yes
Totally.
to do a login or nod no for cancel.
Are you authorized?
When you're presenting that at 360 flights
Yeah,
somewhere?
I'll be showing some head tracking stuff
I
at
can't wait.
360.
That's
Yeah.
gonna be cool. That was I really wanted
business
to
value.
like.
Oh yeah, true business value. Yeah.
I wanted to create a
I see
component
it
that allows you
flipping
to
off
scroll
the
through a
flash
data
player.
grid,
Yeah.
like just by nodding your head or something like that. So it sounds
We
like
can hook that up.
Let's
Yeah.
do it. Let's do it.
You got any more feature requests, or can we wrap up this session of open?
I have a ton more.
Keep going.
You can talk about it off camera.
People can't fast forward, so if they're still watching now, I don't know what they're doing. Like, get a job, you're laid off, I'm sorry, get your free version of Flex.
There you go. Right.
All right, yeah, this has been great. So thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great, thanks for having us.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.